All right. My name is Ben Burgis. This is Give Them an Argument. I am joined once again by Cynthia Cook, who is the one who brought this to my attention. We are going to be watching Batya Ungar-Sargon, author of PhD dissertation, Coercive Pleasures, the Force and Form of the Novel, from 1719 to 1740, from UC Berkeley. So we are watching
Berkeley's own Batya.
Yes, UC Berkeley's own Batya Ungar-Sargon. So she's going to be interviewing Brad Lander. Now, I don't know if he has any thoughts about the form of the novel from 1719 to 1740, but I suppose we'll find out.
Has arrived. 3 candidates endorsed by Democratic Socialist Zoran Mamdani won their primaries in New York this week. Claire Valdez, Daria-Liza Chevalier, and Brad Lander, who I am so honored to have joining me in a minute to discuss his resounding victory over incumbent Dan Goldman. Mamdani is trying to sell this considerable victory as some kind of working class uprising.
Time and time again that I believe the only majority in our country is that of the working class. And what we saw is that a focus on the working class.
That, it turns out, is nonsense. It wasn't working class New Yorkers, but white gentrifiers who carried the day, in some cases against the candidates chosen by actual working class voters, with messaging not centered on economic populism, but abolish ICE and free Palestine. Lander was enthusiastically received in New York's wealthy 10th district, which covers Lower Manhattan and Brownstone, Brooklyn, by focusing his campaign not on socialist economic policy, but rather a promise to block military aid to Israel and an insistence that Israel has committed a genocide. Daria-Liza Chevalier, who won a district that includes parts of the Bronx, actually lost the Bronx part of her district by 30 points. She also lost the majority Hispanic areas, and she lost lower income New Yorkers by 10 points. She did, however, win higher income New Yorkers and carried the college educated by 20 points. Chevalier is herself exactly the kind of person who voted for her. She has been a student for most of the last 14 years in Middle Eastern studies and sociology, and she seems to expect the taxpayer to subsidize her endless career as a student, complaining that she has been deeply abandoned by the establishment because she's, quote, someone who has had to live with the question of whether I can even afford to stay in the city I love. Has she ever considered, I don't know, getting...
Sorry, I don't know how much you want us to like pause or not.
No, go nuts.
Well, I mean, isn't that like the complaint of most New Yorkers?
Yeah.
Like I think that, you know,
yeah,
like it's obviously like you wrote in your piece. It's, I mean, the purpose of it, of course, is just to delegitimize, like, if, you know, these college educated, much like Batya, over credentialed college educated elites, which I think is hilarious. Like if they also want to live, if they are also struggling with affordability in New York City, like somehow their struggle with affordability is not valid or invalid. You know what I mean? Like it's invalid, but it's like, that is the message that they've been relaying to other people who are not, perhaps not college educated, but who are also struggling with affordability. Like, I don't understand. I don't really, Great piece by Ben.
Thank you. So
also, like the choosing of facts too, and the choosing of narratives. I don't know if anyone is keeps up with like Michael Lange's coverage in his Substack. I'll drop it in the chat. He talks a lot about, you know, the narrative wars is the title of his piece, where he's like, you know, it's just interesting the things that she chooses to focus on in her coverage. It's always meant to like delegitimize, you know, who voted for these people.
Yeah. So this is okay. So that's one issue. The cherry picking of the data. That, you know, there are a lot of different ways you can divide up these numbers. I'd also point out that even some of the numbers, for anybody listening to this later as a podcast, that you just saw on screen, if you actually like paid attention to the numbers, a lot of the gaps that she was looking at were not actually that wide. So, you know, in other words, like if 51% of voters in some area that, that like Batya considers to be more working class, voted for the establishment candidate, and 46% voted for the socialist candidate. She says, obviously, the working class prefers the establishment candidate. Well, by your own metric, 45% of them prefer the other one, right? So it's a little confusing. And of course, if instead of 45%, it was 35%, that might make a difference to losing the race, and she'd be saying, oh, see, they lost because the working class rejected them, right? Like this represents a huge inroad that's already been made. So the article that Cynthia's talking about, that wrote for Jacobin, is called "DSA's Critics Are Missing the Point About the Working Class." And in there, I go through some of these arguments that have been made by Batya and other people, and make a few different points about this. One of which is that I think they have a far too narrow definition of what counts as the working class. And in particular, I think they're far too hung up on the college factor when it comes to, which is at best a very imperfect stand-in for economic interest. If you went to at the most obvious level, if two people both have the same job and one of them went to college and one of them didn't, right? Perhaps one of them was unable to parlay their research into the force and form of the novel from 1719 to 1741 into a job in the punditry, right? So they ended up in working at a Starbucks or something. Then the person who went to college, is not part of a different class. I mean, they might potentially be part of a different class if they can, like, someday in the future use that to get a different job. But like, they're certainly not right now, maybe not ever, right? Because of course, this is as Batya herself and other critics who make the same point. Like in the piece I talked about Rabbi Suave at The Hill, and this guy Thomas Edsel, who wrote a big New York Times article making this argument. A lot of times these very people, when they want to be a little demeaning, right, will describe the people they're describing as downwardly mobile, right?
Yeah.
Credentialed or professionals. But it's like, wait a second though. Does the downward mobility have something to do with the politics? In which case you're actually granted that it does have something to do with economic interests. And I would say, right, that from a socialist perspective, if downwardly mobile so-called PMC people, are landing in economic circumstances where they're having trouble making rent, they're worried about being able to afford to live in the city, et cetera, and they see their interests as being linked to those of the sort of traditional working class. That's a good thing, right? That's what we need,
That's
right?
what we want. Right.
Yeah,
and it's like I think that there is a valid, I mean, obviously, like, people like Batya et al. Are coming at this from like an incredibly bad faith perspective, right? And they're just trying to delegitimize the movement, which I don't understand, because apparently Batya is supposed to be like the working class whisperer. So it's like, I mean, she obviously likes to, obviously too, a lot of her ire is stemming from the left's, stance against Israel. I feel like that sort of infiltrates, because I think also, again, I don't think I brought this up in your debate with Sohrab, but like when we had our little debate, right versus left populism, I referenced her article that she wrote for Unheard, where like she seems to still stuck in this strange narrative that like the left doesn't care about Medicare for all for some reason, when like Daria Lisa and Claire, those were like central, and Brad Lander, I think too, like central points of their campaigns. I mean, obviously, yes, like their stance on Israel is, a lot at the forefront, but because that is how these leftist candidates are trying to distinguish themselves from the establishment, and rightfully so, right? Like, that's why Dan Goldman lost. Like, yeah, absolutely. That's probably one of the main factors for why he lost, right? But I think what I've also been seeing around, leftist circles and journalism circles is people making that connection between the establishment's, unfettered allegiance to Israel and these working class policies that would benefit the working class. Like, well, if the establishment, either on the right or the left, because obviously we know they're all the same, if they are just handing over billions of dollars to Israel constantly, what makes me believe that they're like, you're making the connection between that and how they continue to, abandon working and middle class people in America, because like, where's the money going? Where's our money going? Like,
well, that's exactly it, right? Like, I mean, I think that, it's kind of funny because what Batya is doing here is the opposite of what these people sometimes do, which is to say, oh, see, this is just this preoccupation of these, these leftist weirdos. Actually, most people don't, really care about.
That's what she's trying to do. She's still trying to do that.
Yeah. Don't really care about this. And then they'll like sort of trot out polls where, foreign policy isn't in people's top 3 issues they're voting on or whatever. But it's like, okay, one, I saw Zaid Jilani say this, make this point really well on Twitter yesterday. Most voters also wouldn't say that one of their top, 2 or 3 issues is opposition to kicking puppies. But like, if they thought that like a candidate was kicking puppies all the time, that they would still hold that against them, right? That's sort of a huge oversimplification of how voter motivation works. But also, yeah, I think exactly the way that you put it, right, is I think is a very like, I think that's a very like normie point of view that like people that like people who are not necessarily fixated on this, they wouldn't necessarily say that it's one of the top 2 or 3 issues or whatever, but
they're not like in the street protesting with DSA,
yeah, right, clearly,
screaming,
right,
yelling for Palestine, like maybe they're not
right, all that stuff, but they still doesn't mean they like what they're seeing, the images they're seeing, and also I think a lot of those people would connect the dots in pretty much the way that you just did, right? Like, I think one, it's a sort of general sign of like trustworthiness, right? That they have like who seems to be like, who seems to be taking the money. And 2, it's I think that there's a general feeling, whether we're talking about Palestine or, like Russia, Ukraine, or whatever, right? Like conflicts, however you feel about it, right? Like, I think a lot of people look at that, they say, oh, see, like that's what these politicians care about, right? They don't care about helping me, right? They care about like continuing these different wars and conflicts around the world. So yeah, I think that's exactly right. I'd also point out that when she had like her there was one point where her chyron said working class cosplay, right? And I think that the dots she was connecting was from Zoran saying in the clip that there's there's only one majority and that's the working class, to then saying, oh, excellent. But see, there's like let's look at these like voting figures or whatever, and I think you have to make a distinction between 3 senses in which something could be a working class movement. One is that it's one that's fighting for things that are in the interest of the working class, which honestly, every time there's one of these, Batya is not going to do this, but like anytime you watch one of those like Fox News Nation segments where they're like going through the DSA platform and trying to scare people with how radical it sounds, right? Thank
you for your advertisement. Thank you. Like, yeah.
Yeah, it's all stuff like Medicare for all, 32-hour work week.
32-hour work week. And then I saw in one of them, they were, up against Abdul Assad, and it was ending Medicaid debt or something. And I was like, you really think the boomers watching this are going to be like against eliminating their Medicaid debt, or their health insurance, or what am I trying to say? Like their medical debt, ending medical, really? You really think people on both the left and the right, or independents, people who don't vote, are going to look at 32-hour work week and like eliminating medical debt and be like, obviously we know there's a lot of people out there who just are unfortunately.
I think those are broadly pretty popular, right? Like I think that there's a lot of polling to back that up. I saw Data for Progress pulled the 32-hour work week one. There's like a zillion pieces of evidence for that. So yeah, I mean, so if the first sense is that you're fighting for things that, most working class people think are in their interest, right, and certainly seem to be objectively, then like the second sense would be that you think that like your strategy for achieving that is trying to organize and mobilize the working class, and then the third is that you've already succeeded in organizing and mobilizing the working class. And I don't think there's any possible argument that 1 and 2 are true about DSA. That clearly 1 is the platform. 2 is definitely the theory of the case, as like that clip from Zoran and all that stuff like shows that sort of appealing to the economic interests of the majority of society is the strategy, right? So really the argument is just about 3, right? Whether like to what extent that strategy has succeeded yet. It seems like even if we go with the way that Batya cuts up the numbers, if you think that there's if you think, in some area or some way of slicing up like the voters in these districts, 45% of the ones she would call working class voted for Daria Lisa or whichever candidate it was, right? Then like, okay, cool, that is great progress towards that goal, right?
Yes.
There's more work yet to be done, right?
Yes.
But there's a lot of progress. And I'd also say that it is true that like even if you have a broader definition of the working class, which you should, there's like people who are more likely to have gone to college, who have a little bit more of an ambiguous class position in ways that I talked about in the article. The sort of the chunk of those people who are feeling the pinch of a changing economy, their material circumstances are changing, are the people who are the most likely to have already gotten on board, which makes perfect sense because DSA doesn't exist in a vacuum. I mean, this is the portion of the population that's involved in like 95% of like civil society activism in 2026, because we've had like decades and decades and decades this very effective war against organized labor. And, we live in this hugely atomized society. We're like, what, however many decades past that book Bowling alone, right? So yes, people who are still involved in like civil society kind of activism are people who tend to come from the more professionalized, college educated part of the population. DSA is not in a vacuum. It's going to reflect that. And within that, does tend to be that downwardly mobile part of it. And a lot of those people, I would say are, in the working class in a broad sense. But sure, like, obviously, if DSA is going to succeed, if the broader movement that DSA is part of is going to succeed, it can't just appeal to those people. It needs to broaden its base to, some of those, parts of the working class where in, Batya's numbers right now, they're only getting 45% of the vote or whatever, right? Like, and like, there's definitely a discussion to be had about how to do that, about like not sort of leaning into cultural politics that's going to exacerbate the divide between those people and the kind of people who are already on board. But I think this whole long story short, I think this whole critique just kind of misses the point, right? Like this is because look, at the end of the day, even if you think that even if you don't think that, I don't know, what's the Chevalier, or what's do you know what her area of study is?
You mean what she's getting her PhD in?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Okay.
Sociology?
I think that's right. Okay. So let's say, you think that people who are currently getting a PhD in sociology don't deserve to live in New York City as much as people who already have PhDs in English literature. Then like, I don't really understand what the principle is there, but like
by her own logic, she shouldn't live here either.
Like I think that it's like, you should get a job as a pundit too if you want to live here. But like I think everybody deserves to have more economic security, better ability to pursue the life they want to pursue, live where they want to live. And we could have that, that's certainly within our capacity of the wealthiest society in the history of the world in the 21st century, right? So,
Yeah.
and meanwhile, I would also point out, this is the last thing we really will. I know we've been talking about this forever. We really will get back to the video in just a second, but like, it's also kind of crazy to me because Batya is a Trump supporter, and she's always going on about how, you know, MAGA is like the voice of, you know, forgotten, you know, working class people, blah, 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 right? It's like, okay, well, hold on. Let's use your own metrics here. Because in 2016, Hillary Clinton won the majority of the low-income vote. In 2020,
which I didn't know or forgot.
Yeah, right.
Surprised me. I was like, really? Like, she won that? She won more low-income voters than Donald Trump in 2016?
Yeah, she did at Biden in 2020. I mean, they have now. I mean, to be fair, I think Trump probably won. I mean, I couldn't, you know, I'd have to look at the numbers, but I mean, my impression is that he probably won like way more of those people than like Mitt Romney did 4 years before, or John McCain did 4 years before that, right? Mm-hmm. Like traditionally, you know, Republicans always lost that portion of the electorate badly, but like, so I'm, you know, and also in 2024, for the first time, he did win the majority of the low-income vote, right? That was, but like, hold on, by Batya's standards, does that mean that, you know, anybody talking about MAGA the way she does was doing cosplay in 2016 and 2020 and it was only 2024? Or it's like, you know, or it's like, presumably the story she would want to tell is about this gradual breakthrough where you're building inroads. And like, that's also DSA's theory of the case, right? What's the difference?
Well, that's such a good point. Just, I mean, and yeah, I just want to, before we go on, I just want to have a real quick ending key about this subject. So again, I don't know why it won't let me link this article in the chat. Maybe it has something to do with trying to send a link, but like in Michael Lange's piece,
if you put it in the private chat, I can.
Okay.
I can,
well, in Michael Lange's piece, when he looks at it's just, I think it's interesting because it's kind of speaking to you, what you were just saying about DSA, like, you know, needing to grow its base and growing its, you know, its reach. Yeah. And even if you're not talking about like the DSA, but just the sort of idea of, you know, the left being either predominantly made up of like of people who are like, yeah, I'm consciously left, like I'm a leftist, I know I'm on the left or whatever, made up of this like, you know, downwardly mobile college educated voters, whatever. But I think an interesting part of that graph about the college and non-college voters for Chevalier, it's, I mean, again, to your point, it's like, okay, Black non-college educated voters in their district, it's like 46.5% voted for Chevalier compared to 47.3%. It's like, that's literally like what 1 point whatever percentage difference. And so to make the argument like, well, he won over, like, it's like, well, yeah, he did it. He pretty much I don't know if it was considered a landslide, but like, you know, 41% compared to 54% of Hispanic non-college voters. Obviously there's like an element of Hispanic voters, you know, having a kind of allegiance with him, especially older voters, you know, in that district. But like, these are not crazy. This is not a crazy gap in numbers. Like, these are, you know, pretty, obviously white non-college, well, even no white non-college, like went more for Chevalier than Espaillat. And also too, I just wanted to point out in one of the videos I sent you of Batya in a debate with a person on the left, LOL, and she called him espadrille, which is a shoe, a wedge shoe for women. I was like, oh yeah, you're really tapped into this, aren't you? Like, you're really paying attention to the specific details of this case, right? Anyway, but just making the point of what you said about like, yeah, I think the numbers are kind of showing that like trust still needs to be built, because obviously, look, people, and which is why I hate this argument, because it's so pernicious, because it's globbing onto the aesthetics of all of this, of like, you know, these people aren't real working class. Like, the real working class is like this, again, this typical like white guy with a hard hat who works with his hands or is like a trucker or whatever, you know, it doesn't include all of these other people. So it's like, yeah, that's a legitimate critique. Obviously, they're not coming from a good faith position making this legitimate critique. But the other piece of it too that I think is a legitimate critique is, yeah, I think a lot of these downwardly mobile college educated people, like myself included, perhaps were they super tapped into like working class struggle before? No. And it's a legitimate critique to say like, oh, you only care about this now because it's affecting you, right? Like it's really affecting you. And I think that is understandable. And I think it's something, that people should take to, reflect on, because yeah, most of the time, unfortunately, people don't really care about stuff that much unless it's starting to really cut into their material reality.
Hey,
Right?
that's also the like, there's a traditional term for that, which is materialism, right? The idea that that people's people's material interests are going to predict, not always, you have your occasional Friedrich Engels's or whatever, right? But like that, that like on the whole, right, people's material interests are, are going to be motivated enough that those are the building blocks that you can build politics out of. And that's what socialists have always thought, right? And it's like, yeah, this is no, and whatever. I mean, I don't have I have I mean, I've got a PhD. That's something Batya Ungar-Sargon and I have in common. But I have, and it's just, and I suppose since I'm a podcaster and freelance writer, these aren't the most lucrative things anyway ever, right? Like I'm some ambiguous version of downwardly or at least sideways mobile, right? But like it's not. But it's like, yeah, look, I mean, I think that's already baked in, right? I mean, I think that, it's like, yes, it would be beautiful if everybody were motivated, if everybody were motivated all the time by moral concern, for things that they weren't experiencing. That would obviously be a much better world. But of course, in that world, we wouldn't need political movements at all, right? Like we would, people would just, the capitalists would just voluntarily give up, the means of production because they knew it was the right thing to do, and nobody, nobody would give, nobody would have to, we would, Medicare for all would be a non-issue because we would just have doctors, nurses, just volunteering their services left and right, and it's like, but yeah, I mean, in the world we live in, I think we do have to build on the materials that we have available from people's economic interests. To a great extent, you're going to get a hardcore of people who are sort of morally driven enough that they'll, I wanted a line, you were quoted in the article before we started. I can't take any credit for this because, this is, this is a suggestion from my editor, Megan Day, is like, Martin Luther King, right, is a classic example of an overly credentialed, PMC type, right, who was played a big role in organizing a movement of mostly working class people. But yeah, I mean, it's not like this is, I guess to me, it's like accepting the sad fact that, we live in a fallen world. It's very hard to get most people to notice things, that aren't affecting them in a vacuum. I mean, if they're already part of a movement, et cetera, that's different. But like, just I don't know, accepting all of that. It's like, okay, but you could be part of the problem or you could be part of the solution.
Yeah,
right?
that doesn't mean people don't care about it. Like, I mean, the last thing I'll say about this is like, okay, so for what kind of sucks? Well, again, just piggybacking off what I said, it kind of, yeah, okay, fine, that kind of sucks that like people only care about stuff when it starts to materially affect them in their life. And yeah, what kind of sucks is that, like, I was thinking about this the other day, and this is more of like I guess sort of like a philosophical, spiritual reflection, but I'm like, I think that, and this makes me sad when I think about this, but I do feel that, when you have less, when you come from less, you expect less. And you don't expect for things. Oh, it's like makes me sad just thinking about this because it is. I think when people come from poverty or they're used to their building breaking down, they're used to, and they don't necessarily believe that they have the right to because that's what, like, you know, they've come to expect. That's maybe how they've been socialized to think. Whereas someone like me, you know, which, by the way, I just want to say, Batya, sorry, I get so triggered, Ben. I get really triggered because I'm like, I am not wealthy. Like most of the people, and the people who, by the way, I am in DSA and I am on an organizing committee for healthcare to get people healthcare. I know she likes to claim that, like, you know, we don't care about healthcare or something. I don't know what made up shit in her mind about we don't care about healthcare. I'm literally I'm literally the communications coordinator for the healthcare working group in DSA, trying to pass single payer healthcare in the state of New York. More on that coming later. But like, you know, most of the people I'm organizing with are not like wealthy, and I'm sure there are people in there, right, who like are wealthy or who come from wealth or who have like trust funds or whatever.
Most of them, right? No,
which, by the way, would be great because then they wouldn't have to go to work every day like I have to.
Yes.
You know,
they're knocking on doors all the time. Yeah,
yeah, they can dedicate all their time to that. But I'm just saying, like, I think the last thing, just wrapping this up, is saying that sucks. Perhaps that's the way in, but maybe if there are people who do expect more and then their material interests start to, you know, really their material reality starts to get, you know, threatened more and more and more, they expect more and they feel like they deserve more, and perhaps that can help bolster an entire movement by trying to educate people who already expect less to say, no, you deserve more and you should expect more. Like, these are your rights for your building, you know, and this is
slightly push back on is like, I think that it depends what you mean when you say, you know, people don't think they have a right to it or whatever. I think that there's a distinction here between acceptance and resignation, right? Like, I think that I think a lot of people think that they should have some of these things, but they're resigned to not getting them, right? And I think that there's like, you know, like, I think that very often, you know, the issue is not, you know, look, I mean, do you think you should, you know, do you think it's reasonable that, you know, that like not very many groceries, you know, cost like $150, right? You know, do you think that, you know, that we should have, you know, we should have a shorter work week, right? All this stuff. Like, I think most people are pretty in touch with what's in their interest, especially when it gets closest to the nub of like their own like day-to-day life experience. I think that the issue is just that it's is just kind of risk reward, right? What the payoff is for like trying to do anything about it, right? As opposed to just resigning yourself to it and kind of trying to make the best of it, and, you know, trying to, you know, sort of pursue individual level solutions to your problems, which is the strategy that, you know, that a lot of people, you know, I think totally rationally, right? Except because it's like, yeah, look, I could, like, you know, spend a lot of time on this thing that I don't think is going to pay off anyway, right? And that like might even come with risks, right? You know, like to my job or whatever, or I could just keep my head down and just try to, you know, like, you know, try to look out for my own interests the best I possibly can within that, right? And I think what organizers have always done, right, is like to try to, you know, change those calculations by getting enough people on board that, you know, people can start to see, you know, here's how, like, if you know, put some points on the board, so you can start to see, oh, actually it is in my interest to stick with this, right? And you know, sort of build that culture of solidarity that can help you win more things in the future. That would be my little pitch. If you want the like 300-page version of that, that's the Class Matrix by Vivek Chibber.
Started that.
Nice.
I wanted to have it done by this podcast, but I didn't. So.
Next time. All right. Sounds good.
Hi, Vivek. Hope you're watching.
A job? Of course not. And her views are typical of the overcredentialed, underemployed, resentful elite to which she belongs.
Underemployed seems super interesting here.
Right.
It's like, sounds like you maybe have some legitimate economic complaints.
Yeah, and not just not employed, but underemployed, implying that you understand that, you know, people are
Yeah,
struggling.
you have some kind of job, but like, yeah, you have some kind of job or jobs, right? But you're still struggling to get by.
You're giving away the.
Yeah, exactly. You're kind of giving away the weekend here.
Hates America. Chevalier literally wiped her dirty hands on the American flag. She called America an effing disgrace. She doesn't believe in prisons. She's against interracial marriages. She believes illegal immigrants who commit murder must be allowed to stay here because deportations are racist. She's a founding member of Columbia University Apartheid Divest, whose stated goal is to undermine and eradicate America through the use of violence. Now, she'll have these views from the halls of Congress. None of this is to deny the affordability problem. This system is broken. The cost of housing, groceries, insurance, and healthcare are criminal. Many people who work hard feel that they can't get ahead. But those are not the people who voted for the Democratic Socialists of America.
Okay,
Abolish ICE, defund the police, and free Palestine aren't a working.
What did she just say? Many people are struggling with affordability. But is that, did she just say, but most of those people are not who voted for these candidates?
Yeah, which is funny because like 30 seconds before that, she described the people who did as underemployed.
Right. It just keeps.
So if you're underemployed,
your own argument.
You would in fact be struggling with affordability, and in fact, you might care more about what Chevalier is saying about affordability than whether she tweeted dumb shit in the summer of 2020, right? Like that's which by the way, back then, when people were getting canceled, in the opposite direction for what they tweeted before then, I was against that too, right? Yeah. Like I am a believer in a general amnesty for tweets. But in any case, let's keep going. Let's see if we can get to the actual thing.
Class agenda. They're the cries of an over-credentialed, gentrifying elite consumed with resentment and the belief that the taxpayer should fund their vanity degrees and podcasts. Joining me now, I'm so honored to have Brad Lander, former New York City comptroller, and now the Democratic nominee for Congress in New York's 10th district. Brad, thank you so much for being here.
It's an honor to be on with you, Batya. Long-time fan, not always an agreeer, but a long-time fan.
I have to start by saying it's very cool that you came here. And the thing that I heard about you this week was from somebody who volunteers at the same soup kitchen as me, a kind of Haitian man about town, Rudy. And what he said to me was, Brad Lander won because everywhere you turn in this city, you see Brad Lander. He goes everywhere and he talks to everybody. So first of all, congratulations on your victory.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate it. And I wanted to come here because I've seen you hold independent views. When you were at the Forward, you curated this very broad spectrum of point of views. And, we'll disagree on some things, but in some ways, that's what we're supposed to do as well, both like Jewishly and democratically. Yeah. And I'm grateful for the opportunity.
And many people would not have done this. So thank you again. All right, let's get started.
Yeah.
You left the DSA in 2023 over October 7th. You said that the language the DSA used about Hamas was vile, was the word you used. Yet now you're sharing a stage with them. You're accepting their support. How do you explain this 180?
So, I joined DSA when I was a freshman in college in 1987, and I was active when I was on campus. I hadn't been really active since then, wasn't endorsed by them in any of my races. And yes, I thought the rally that they lifted up or co-sponsored on October 8th was vile, and I said so. At the same time, there's many things we agree on in the fight for Medicare for all, to make housing more genuinely affordable, to get money out of politics. So, I made this cross endorsement of Mayor Mamdani last year because I didn't want Andrew Cuomo to be the mayor of New York City. And I thought we agreed on enough that was the right thing to do. And he is focused on an affordability agenda in New York City. And I did try hard in my race to focus on the things that matter to the voters, both in my district, on housing, on healthcare, on money in politics.
But why wasn't that vile Hamas rally a deal breaker? I mean, you would never share a stage with Donald Trump, but he supports lowering the cost of housing, right? Whatever Trump has done is a deal breaker. Why was support for Hamas not a deal breaker from the DSA?
Well, DSA doesn't support Hamas. You'll have to have them on to talk about their views. There was a rally that they advertised, essentially, and I thought it was terrible, and I said so. And I met with their leadership afterwards, and I told them directly. And I'm really clear about, we can talk about it, about my point of view on Israel and Palestine. There's some things I agree on, some things I disagree on. But those bigger goals of the ways that our current electoral system is failing working people with a broken status quo that's serving wealthy special interests and not working people, you need a team to fight together with. My political home for most of the last several decades has been the Working Families Party and will continue to be. But I will work with folks who want to do the things I think we need, like unrig our healthcare system or tax the wealthiest folks.
So there is no red line on the left after which you would no longer share a stage with someone. Will you campaign with Daria-Liza Chevalier, for example, who doesn't believe Israel exists, who wiped her hands with the American flag, hates America, hates Israel? Will you campaign with her?
I mean, you'll have to have her on herself. She's now the Democratic nominee to be a member of Congress.
So yes, you will?
I will support her in her general election, just like I'll support Tom Suozzi and Laura Gillen and theirs, who have point of views far to my right.
So is there a red line beyond which someone is so anti-Semitic you won't share a stage with them?
I mean, for sure. And I don't think that Daria-Liza is anti-Semitic. I urge you to have her on. She disagrees strongly about Israel, but I don't believe she has any animus for or ill will toward Jews. If I thought someone did, absolutely. If I thought that they had hate in their hearts, if I thought they were jeopardizing our safety, then no, I would not campaign with them.
You know that many, many Jews feel that Mamdani is endangering the safety of Jewish New Yorkers.
Okay,
I hear this
just real quick.
Believe me, I'm sure I hear.
You notice how she never engages with any of the talking points that he laid out about affordability. It's just all Israel.
Yeah, she is literally doing exactly what she accused the candidates of doing. That, like, of like not
I'm just going to say that too.
Affordability and economics, just talking about Israel Palestine.
Right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Also, even as I'm trying to be disciplined and watch longer chunks, one of the so we don't spend 5 hours watching this 40-minute interview. I did. One of the reasons I did pause there about this thing about how when she says many Jews feel afraid, because of Zoran Mamdani, as I'm sure you saw, but for anybody who didn't.
Oh yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
They like more than that. There was, we have actual polling on this. So the Forward. Which is the newspaper that Lander just mentioned, just mentioned that Batya, I guess, used to be like an opinion editor for it. Sounded like I'm not totally clear on that. But yeah, here we go. Here's the Forward's headline: Mamdani more popular than Netanyahu among U.S. Jews. New polls show. The Associated Press, NROC. Center for Public Affairs research survey of 1,022 Jewish adults nationwide, conducted from June 11th through June 17th, found that 44% of American Jews hold a favorable opinion of Zoran Mamdani, compared with 39% who view him unfavorably. So that's 5 points. There's like several percent, who I guess aren't sure, don't have an opinion, but like. Which by the way, the fact that it's only so let's see, 39, 44. So that's the fact that there's only what does that leave, like 17% who didn't have an opinion, by the way, says something about what a phenomenon Zoran has been, because like the idea that only 17% of Americans wouldn't have an opinion about whoever the mayor of New York was at any given time, right, would be pretty unprecedented as far as I know. Maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe all Americans used to have an opinion about Eric Adams, but I don't think so. I think most people just didn't think about him outside of New York. But out of the ones who did have an opinion, 5% more were favorable than unfavorable, right? It's +5 favorability. By contrast, just 32% of their respondents said they have a favorable opinion of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, while 59% say they have a negative view of the longtime Israeli leader. And I'd also point out, right, if you look at what Zoran has said about Israel Palestine, he consistently, I mean, this is like really interesting, because I was talking to a good friend, about this a couple of days ago, DSA person, and we were kind of talking about this sort of, universalism and identity politics and all this stuff as it pertained to Zoran. And, one of the things I said to this person is I certainly wouldn't deny that Zoran's own background, his own identity characteristics played a role in the sort of way he got people excited, right? Like that was definitely some part of the package. But it is really interesting that he never appealed to that, right? Like, and like even when he talked about Israel-Palestine, he never said, like, as a Muslim.
Yeah, right.
He never brought identity characteristics into it in any way. He never even talked about like Palestinians having a better claim in the land than Israelis or anything like that, right? That was never any part of it, right? Instead always was framed in terms of absolutely universal standards of human rights and international law.
Yes. Whenever he's asked the sort of, do you think Israel's right to exist question, he says, well, it's a state of equal rights, but not with any sort of hierarchy based on ethnicity or race or religion, just like, and he always brings up Saudi Arabia, right? I don't think Saudi Arabia should exist with like inequality the way that it does right now, right? So, and whenever he describes this stuff, he always says, like the word that he most often uses to describe the genocide Gaza is war crimes. He'll say like October 7th was a war crime, but Israel responded with worse war crimes, right? Like, and there's also polling on that, right? The majority of Jewish Americans think that Israel's committed war crimes in Gaza, and like not a majority, but like a big chunk think it's committed genocide in Gaza. Right? So this is like the same deal as like if 45% of people in some one of the numbers that Batya cherry picks voted for the establishment candidate, she'll say, oh, the working class voted, rejected, the DSA candidate, right? It's like she'll say, oh, her cheat code here is many, many Jews believe. It's like, okay, but judging by the numbers, many, many, many Jews do not believe this. Right? Well, what about the many Jews that voted for Brad Lander over Dan Goldman? Do they not count? Are they legitimate Jews? Because that's what essentially you're arguing.
Isn't that like the most Jewish congressional district in the United States?
Isn't that the most anti-Semitic attack that you could have against that percentage of Jews in New York City who voted for Brad Lander over Dan Goldman?
Yeah,
anti-Semitic.
This incumbent who Lander beat by like 30 points.
Yeah. Is it really? I'm trying to look at how much it was.
I might be getting my wires crossed, but that's what I remember.
It was a lot, though. It was instantly, it was like, oh, Lander's he defeated him. I was like, wow, that was like 2 minutes. I'm trying to find how much it was. For literally, I Googled it, and for some reason, it was like all of these Jewish publications. Like,
yes. So from the New York Times, this is remove. Share screen. So yeah, it's the New York Times article about it, with 66% of the vote counted. So obviously this is dated, and maybe the number has changed. I want to be clear on this. This was the number when 66% had been counted. Mr. Lander, former city controller and mayoral candidate who's criticized Israel war in Gaza, was more than 30 points ahead of the incumbent Representative Dan Goldman, a pro-Israel former federal prosecutor, et cetera, et cetera. So at least as of the initial numbers, he was more than 30. He did beat it by more than 30 points.
Well, I guess all of those voters are anti-Semitic by her own logic. So
exactly.
All of the Jews who, which I would want to dig into, like the percentage of Jewish people who are in that pool of who voted for Brad Lander, but
yeah, it's safe to say a lot, right? Like
a lot. Yeah.
Whether it was the majority or a very large minority. Yeah.
Many Jews.
Exactly, right? And it's like also like, when would, look, this is such an obvious point, it feels cheap to say it, but it's like, for what other group would Batya talk this way?
Right. Right.
Like, no. It's like, because it's like, look, it's the, because it's certainly true that many Jews think what Batya says they think, although judging by the numbers, that's fewer than the ones who don't, right? But like also like, look, can you imagine Batya being like, well, how can you support Donald Trump, who, many, many women think is a misogynist? How can you support, these Republicans who many, many Black people think are racist, right? Like, this is the, because like, I'm pretty sure in any of those cases, Batya would be like, no. This group is not a monolith. They're, look at all, Black Republicans, look at all these, I'm a woman and I don't think whatever. Like, that's what she would say. But this is the one case, right, where she wants to treat, she wants to treat the whole demographic group as a hive mind. And it's not even, and the thing that she wants to treat them as being a hive mind thinking is not even what the plurality of them think, right?
Well, if there's a hive mind, it seems to be in the other direction.
Exactly. Like, if we're going to play this incredibly stupid game, what we should say is that Jews like Zoran because more of them do than don't.
Right.
Anyway, also just real quickly on the DSA of it all, I think that so like basically for anybody who, I joined DSA at the very end of 2015, which means that like I've been in the organization longer than probably like 99% of current members, right? Like it's and it's maybe not that much, but like whatever, right? Vast majority, I'm sure, right? Like maybe even because like now it passed 120,000, so it might literally, if it's not that, right, it's certainly a very overwhelming majority.
The anti-Semites are coming out of the woodwork. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, but like DSA. Like when Brad Lander joined it in 1987, it was a tiny organization.
That's crazy to me. I was like, wow.
Yeah. I mean, DSA was only formed in 1982, right? So I mean, that's so yeah. It was very early on. It was definitely a more, I mean, people often exaggerate the point. If you go back and look at what they were saying in the 80s, I think there is a fair amount of continuity with today. But I think it's fair to say, like relatively speaking, it was more moderate than it is now, right? And it's, I think that like I think his politics are probably typical of like a sort of older generation of people who might have been involved in some of that stuff, who might be uncomfortable with like the degree of radicalism they see about Palestine and other topics, right? And so I think somebody like Lander, like it makes sense that he would have left after October 7th. It also makes sense that he, even if he didn't literally come back in the sense of rejoining or whatever, right, that he was willing to like rebuild some of those bridges later, right? And I think that, I mean, my own view on this is, look, I think if you want to criticize the content of that rally he's talking about, then yeah, I probably agree with some of the criticisms, right? I mean, I think I mean, look.
Well, that was my question. Like, what was the content of the rally, or was it, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, because I think you can find people. I don't think probably not most attendees, right? But but I don't, I mean, I don't know that anybody was doing a poll, right? But like you can like find people who are involved in that, who actually had said pro-Hamas things, which I would very strongly disagree with. Zoran would very strongly disagree with, right? He's said that many times, right? That he thinks October 7th was a war crime, right? Has no sympathy for Hamas, all this stuff. But I also think that the idea that it was somehow, so yeah, look, if anybody's saying pro-Hamas things there, those are people I disagree with. But I also think that the idea that it's innately bad or innately pro-Hamas to have a Palestine rally on October 8th, I think is kind of crazy. I think that because the Israeli Air Force was flattening like whole like apartment blocks in Gaza by the end of the day on the 7th, right? That they'd been doing a ton of that by the time those rallies happened on the 8th. There's all this like weird revisionist history that people do about this, where it's like, oh, Israel hadn't even started responding yet. Right? They had. They were like
ready. They were booked and busy. They were booked and busy. They were ready.
Yeah, exactly. Right. They were responding brutally immediately. Again, literally.
Which is why people wanted to have the rally.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
Like, we already know what you're going to do, and we're not going to let you like steamroll or like you're going to steamroll.
I mean, my question has always been, how many Palestinian children should you have waited for the IDF to kill before you started protesting, right? Like, and I think, and because there definitely were some by then, right? And also, like you said, right? Like everybody knew, like everybody who'd been plugged into this, like maybe didn't know exactly how bad it was going to be, right? But they had an idea, right? And this is, so I would say, like somebody like Lander, who I have basically positive feelings about, it's like, yeah, it's like a little bit squishier on this. And like, and like, I think it took a while for somebody like him to sort of see exactly how bad it was. Right. And then like, he has, called it a genocide, et cetera, right, since then. Right. So I think that, I think ultimately, this whole thing about would like that this, this having like the mere fact of having done a pro-Palestinian rally on October 8th, treating that as damning, it's like, I think, I mean, what you're doing is you're essentially getting mad at people for having been right earlier than somebody like Lander was right. Like it's, I think that those people were the ones who had better instincts, right? Although, credit where credit is due for him for getting on board afterward, right? Like, but also last thing about this, at least on my end, like when she says you wouldn't share a stage with Donald Trump, I wonder about that, right? It's like Zoran Mamdani.
Did she say that about Brad Lander?
She did, yeah.
You wouldn't share a stage with Donald Trump. That's what she said.
Yeah, because she was trying to do like hypocrisy baiting, like, you wouldn't share a stage with, Donald Trump, but you would with Chevalier or, Darylese or whatever, right? Like it. Okay. I mean, Zoran famously has met a couple times with Trump. I don't know. I'm pretty sure if you imagine like, if like Brad Lander is elected to Congress and he gets, he like champions some piece of legislation that gets through and he manages to get Trump to sign it. You think like Brad Lander wouldn't do like a press conference with Trump to announce? I'm sure he would.
Right.
It's like
I would hope.
Yeah, right. What is this? What is this like? What is this weird like assumption that, I mean, I don't know, like that's my biggest complaint about Brad Lander so far. He should just run her off by being like, oh no, I totally would.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, I mean, with the caveat being like, if he wanted to sign a deal tomorrow, I would absolutely.
Yeah, right. No, exactly. Right. Yeah. Like, I wouldn't share a statement just to like,
yeah, I wouldn't buddy with him, like just for the purposes of like aesthetics or something. But if he wanted to sign, a presidential order tomorrow to end, funding to Israel, I would be right there. And that you're right. That would have probably been like a good, Brad's not like super like aggressive with the talking point. He's our Mr. Rogers, so we appreciate that in its own right. But yeah, that's a good answer.
Go back to his neighborhood.
More than Jews are feeling so much fear and anxiety right now. I mean, anti-Semitism rises in times of war and times of fascism, and we're amidst both. And you see it, I think, most dangerously on the right, but you see it on the left as well. From both, there's no doubt from
who murdered
from both places.
Two people because he thought they were Jews in D.C. He chanted the same thing you chanted: "Free, free Palestine."
I mean, that's vile, yes, but there's a big difference. I mean, that was vile anti-Semitism, and I called it out the day it happened, and I try to do it every time when people graffitied the homes of the board members of the Brooklyn Museum.
Is that
them because they were Jewish, not having anything to do with policies toward Palestine. I'll call it out. But yes, I'm for a free Palestine because I don't think Israelis will be truly safe until Palestinians are free. And to me, there's just no contradiction between standing up for Palestinian human rights, as you have done. I mean, when you supported Issa Amro.
And on this very show, we're calling for people to pay attention to the protest in Gaza right now against Hamas. But Mamdani doesn't just want Palestinians to have their own state. He believes Israel should not exist as a Jewish state.
I mean, he thinks there should be a binational state that's a state for all its citizens. That's not my point of view. I remain a liberal Zionist. I believe in the vision of a...
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I was going to say, most Jews view that view as an endangerment of the Jewish Israelis who live in Israel, to ask them to basically live under a majority Muslim rule, like to give Sharia law a chance, right? Most Jews feel that the view that Israel should be a binational state is to endanger the lives of 8 million Jews.
I mean, there are many Jewish anti-Zionists who also believe in the vision of a binational state. Albert Einstein, who they asked to be the president of Israel, had concerns that Jewish sovereignty wouldn't work well. This is a debate to have. I disagree with the mayor on this point, but I do not believe that he is endangering the lives of Jews. Here in New York City, he kept Jesse Tisch on as police commissioner. He grew the funding for the mayor's office to combat anti-Semitism. How Israelis and Palestinians are going to learn to live together. And whether that's, as I think you and I think it should be, is in two states that each, Israel with a majority of Jews, but protecting the full equal rights of its Palestinian citizens, and a Palestine with a majority of Palestinians, but there'll be some settler, minority Jewish members there. That makes sense to me, but there's people promoting a binational state or confederation. Palestinians and Israelis are going to have to sit down at the table and figure this out. And by calling for change to end a system that, look, I do think is essentially apartheid. That's not anti-Semitism, that's politics. So
Zoran Mamdani came under a lot of criticism for this comment that he made at a rally. I think you were at the rally. It was for your campaign, and the other two that he endorsed. Let's play that.
Oh, God.
Now is the time of monsters. These monsters take many forms today. In those who fund television ads that blanket the airwaves with misleading and bad faith attacks about Claire, Brad, and Dari. Those who would rather spend far more on political contributions than they would ever be made to pay in taxes. In AIPAC, for whom the only thing more frightening than democracy being allowed to run its course is an end to genocide and Netanyahu's wars.
This demonization of AIPAC as monsters who are undermining American politics, what's best for America, you yourself actually called this anti-Semitic. Can we pull this up? In a quote to the New York Times, you said that these tropes about AIPAC, about Jewish money and power are anti-Semitic. And then you said, but I have to talk about it in that way. I mean, how do you justify acknowledging that it is anti-Semitic to talk about Jewish support for Israel in this way and then doing it just for political expediency?
Not for political expediency, because I think what AIPAC is doing is corrosive for American democracy, is bad for Israel, is bad for Palestinians, is bad for the world at this point. When I said I feel like I have to, it's because I think what they're doing is dangerous, and yes, bad for Jews and Palestinians and the United States.
But
and that's what I meant when I said—
just an avenue for pro-Israel American Jews.
Well, first,
to fund the candidates they like. Why should American Jews have less of a right to give money to candidates?
Well, to be clear, I have, when I say I think we need dark money out of politics, I always make clear I'm talking about Wall Street PACs and crypto PACs and AI PACs and private equity spending and AIPAC. I think that kind of super PAC, dark money, is bad for our politics. Here in New York City, I passed the strongest independent expenditure disclosure act anywhere in the country. And I think it's important to put it in that broader framework. If you over-focus, particularly on AIPAC relative to other dark money, then I think you got to dig a little deeper. But yeah, I also think that AIPAC's upholding unconditional U.S. military support for Netanyahu's wars has been really terrible, like catastrophically bad. And I feel compelled to talk about it because those are my beliefs. They're very Jewish beliefs. Other Jews can disagree with them. And does it make me feel a little queasy? Just like when Marco Rubio said that Netanyahu persuaded Trump to go into war with Iran. Like, I don't think Marco Rubio was being anti-Semitic, but it borders on dangerous tropes. How to talk about, but you can't not talk about it. So to me, you try to be as careful as you can. I use the words, I try to choose my words carefully. I try to come everywhere to talk about it. Believe me, on the left, they know I want there to be a Jewish and democratic Israel.
But
so,
you are
I get called a Zionist baby killer as often as
exactly. Well, but that's the point, is you're seen—
I wouldn't use either of those words. I would say, here's my point of view. And that's why I'm here.
But you are seen by many Jews as sort of whitewashing the people who hate us and want to kill us and seek to do us wrong. And
I don't believe they hate us or want to kill us.
Well,
or
all right.
do us
Final
wrong.
question.
They have a different point of view on whether there should be a Jewish state.
Okay, final question, which gets to the heart of this. Mrs. Mamdani posted a photo of herself on election day in which she told people to go out and vote and mentioned 2 of the 3 candidates who her husband had endorsed. Your name was left off. Why?
I mean, look, I was proud to have the mayor's support in this race. I was proud to cross-endorse him a year ago. You'll have to, I can't speak for her politics.
Why do you think she left you off?
I mean, look, I guess I'll say something a little different. If I think of myself as like anyone in Israel, it's standing together. It's this group of Israelis and Palestinians fighting for equal rights. And they just formed a political party. And I am so proud of them. Omdim Biachad, standing together. They're on the boycott, divestment, and sanctions list. It's part of why I don't participate in BDS. They're fighting for Palestinian human rights and equal rights. But they do it in a way that not everyone views as, that some people view as normalizing. So, I speak up for my politics. I try to tell you who I'm, like what I think and what I'm fighting for. And I think right now in New York City, something really hopeful is moving. And I guess I would ask you and other Jewish New Yorkers to take like one breath. Shabbat is approaching. We could disagree on how to approach Israel and Palestine and still not compromise on anybody's humanity, and standing up for the rights of Palestinian kids in Gaza, created just as much in God's image as my kids, doesn't mean that I won't stand up and fight fiercely for Jewish people as well.
Why did Mrs. Mamdani not endorse you?
I mean, you'll have to ask her that. I'm proud to have the mayor's support. And,
Brad Lander, God bless you and protect you. I am just so grateful to you for this conversation, which actually did make me feel a lot better.
I'm so glad. It was really nice.
So much for doing this.
Thank you.
It's such an honor to have you. Thank you so much.
So nice
For the Republican response to the...
She actually seemed that actually seemed genuine. I mean, I will say in her defense, like, that was kind of a good journalistic follow-up, because he didn't, he clearly is not really wanting to be like, well, I think it's probably because she feels this way. You know what I mean? But
yeah, he kind of suggested it in the first part of his answer. Like he didn't quite say it, right? So it would have been fair for her to say, okay, so is that what you think is going on here, right? But he said, so he brought up this Israeli and Palestinian group, this like group in Israel of like Israeli Jews and also like Palestinian citizens of Israel standing together, which and said, look, I really like these guys, but like, they're on the like BDS, like boycott list, because like people who are like more hardcore anti-Zionist don't like them because they sort of have this very both sidesy kind of view of things that's, that like, people see as overly legitimizing of, Israel, or sort of portraying this as more of a two-sided conflict rather than just rather than just apartheid, and so it seemed like what he was trying to suggest when he brought that up was, look, here's a case where there are people who have like one degree of criticism of Israel, and there are other people who don't think that's radical enough and they don't like them. And like, so I think he was trying to suggest maybe something similar is going on with Mrs. Mamdani, right? That like she doesn't think I go far enough, right?
Which is clearly why the DSA didn't endorse him.
Yeah, exactly, right? Which is like, because it's like, oh, in other words, maybe Mrs. Mamdani just agrees with the DSA position. Right. And so she's just like promoting the candidates who DSA endorsed, not necessarily candidates who her husband endorsed, which like, perhaps despite being married to each other, these are two different human beings who have their own thoughts and opinions.
Which that indicates too that like, well, to me, I think that's very healthy, by the way. But also too, it indicates to me that Zoran, which I think personally, I mean, I'm part of DSA, but like a lot of people point out, the DSA is also not a monolith. Like there's many of us, who are more want to take more of this approach, and many of us who don't agree with that approach. And I mean, I will say too, like, I don't feel like I can speak, very authoritatively on this issue, just because like there's more that I feel like I need to figure out. No, I mean, obviously I'm clearly like aligned with most of the left on it in terms of like, believing it's a genocide, we have to get rid of funding, all this stuff. But like, I do kind of agree with Mamdani's ostensible political calculation, which is like, I'm still going to endorse this guy. Well, first of all, like we went through this during the primary, and they have a kind of political alliance that I think has served both of them very well. So to me, that's just smart politics, right? But also, it's not like it doesn't feel like an empty political strategy. It's like, no, like there's obviously a gradient of us on the left, but if we're going to have like a Chris Holland or a Chris Van Hollen, we want to shift it so that the people all over here who are like pro-Israel establishment goons, they fall off, like they fall off and then go be a Republican, and then we shift it enough to where, there's still a little bit of a gradient, right? Like you have Brad Lander who's a little bit, not 100% aligned with like the DSA, Mrs. Mamdani's view on how we should be treating this issue. But we're like mostly aligned. And of course, as Mamdani, of course, I'm going to support Brad Lander over Dan Goldman for this seat. Like, of course, I'm going to gun for this person, to be in this role over Dan Goldman, because we need those people to fall off this way. Do you see what I'm saying? So I think personally, from a political perspective, I think that's smart. But obviously, Mrs. Mamdani isn't a politician. So, she has the right to like be like,
yeah, I mean, if she just
agrees, husband, but
if she just agrees with the majority of DSA rather than agreeing with her husband, right? That doesn't seem shocking, right. or interesting even, right? And also like, look, I mean, I'm sure if she was in, I'm sure if she lived in Dan Goldman's district, she would have voted for Brad Lander, right? Like,
right.
This is. Which is also like a distinction that's worth flagging here, because DSA didn't endorse Lander, but I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but I would be beyond shocked if whatever voter guide they put out didn't like say we recommend a vote for, like they haven't, because this is something that's often very confusing to people from outside, because it's like legitimately does seem a little bit confusing. It's like that. So DSA branches often put out these voter guides that like will of course say who the organization endorsed, but like they'll also like where there's no endorsement, so like the endorsement is something that like the chapter as a whole is voting on. There's a whole process, right? Then like whoever they like assign to put together the voter guide will also make recommendations, which is softer than endorsement, but just like, it's like, oh yeah, if you live in this district or whatever, we don't have an endorsed candidate, but here are the choices. I guess this one's the best, that's like the end, and whereas like, so that's something an organization can do, but like a politician like Zoran, I mean, that's not like, he's not gonna like, you're either endorsing somebody or you're not, right? Like there's not going to be that gray area, right? And obviously he's going to endorse Brad Lander. I mean, it was like a huge thing in the election that, that Lander did the cross endorsement and the whole thing. He, by all accounts, Zoran, was like played a big role in like encouraging Lander to run for the congressional seat. Right. So yeah, I mean, I think, I guess I'm probably like on the spectrum of Israel-Palestine views. I mean, I'm as far as I can tell exactly where I know less about I know less about Mrs. Mamdani's views, because like she's not a politician. She's just a person who's like Instagram stories and Spotify playlists are weirdly scrutinized, but like that's like she's not like giving speeches explaining her views, but like I think Mr. Mamdani I think as far as I could tell where he's at on this is where I'm at, right? Which is that I think that there are versions of pro-Palestinian views I wouldn't agree with, right? But I would still go further than Lander does, right? Like I think that because the Lander position is like, he'll sometimes still call himself a liberal Zionist, right? By which he seems to mostly mean that he wants a two-state solution. And I think I think that the way that Zoran expressed this during the campaign last year was perfect, right? That I don't think Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state. I think it has a right to exist as a state of equal rights. I don't think Saudi Arabia, right, has a right to exist as like an Islamic kingdom. I think it has a right to exist
as a Christian nationalist state.
Yeah, right, exactly. Right, this is the
Judeo-Christian state. Even though they like to continue to push on us, like we are a Judeo-Christian nation. I'm like, no, we're not. Maybe de facto we are, but not de jure, bitch.
Yeah.
I like
Judeo-Christian is such a wacky phrase anyway. I mean, that's like basically something people started saying post World War II because they felt guilty about the Holocaust, so they'd like put the Judeo in there, right? That's like because like before that everybody would have just said like Christian civilization. Now it's like Judeo-Christian civilization, right? That's like we'll let you guys in the club too, right?
Interesting that you're bringing up guilt around the Holocaust.
Yeah, because what does Judeo-Christian actually mean, right?
What does that mean? Just like Jewish Christian peoples mainly, like that's who mainly we're made up of.
Because like I could understand saying like Judeo-Christian religious belief. So if what you mean is like any sort of like religious belief system that like starts with like the Old Testament and Abrahamic monotheism or whatever, but it's like, okay, but if that's what it means, then you got to include Islam too,
right?
So what possible? In fact, if anything, I mean, Judaism and Islam theologically have a lot more in common than either of them does with Christianity, because they both believe in the absolute oneness of God. God can't be incarnated as a person, and all this stuff. That's So the whole thing is just kind of this weird nonsense, like political designation. But yeah, exactly. Like it's not. America. Like I am. I don't know, something I've said a lot in the last couple of years, which sounds really bad when I first say it, but like you gotta roll with it and give me a second to say what I mean, right? Is that nothing makes me feel more patriotic than thinking about Israel, by which I do not mean that I'm like swelling up with patriotic pride that we're like sending them 2,000-pound bombs to drop on refugee camps in Gaza, right? That makes me sick. What I mean by that is that I feel immensely grateful that the Jewish side of my family, when time came to get the fuck out of Ukraine, came here, right, instead of migrating to Palestine, which means that I got to grow up in a multi-ethnic democracy instead of like a weird militarized apartheid ethno state. Right. I mean, I think the way that America mostly is, the JD Vances of the world trying real hard to change it, but like the way that America mostly is, I think is the way that every country should be. That you have that you have a state that's as you say, certainly at least not de jure, bitch. That's like it's not
on a t-shirt.
Exactly, right.
That's a merch moment.
That at least on a legal level, right, like is has totally equal status for all races, religions, ethnicities, beliefs that you can't you can't legally discriminate. We don't. It's not a it's not supposed to be a state for white people or a state for Christians or anything like that, right? It's supposed to be equally a state of everybody who lives here. I mean, this is why I think that like the thing, one of the few pieces of really, really good news that we've had in a while, right, is the Supreme Court, upholding the birthright citizenship clause in the 14th Amendment, because this is I think sort of core to, I think that's pretty core to the project of having a national identity that's not based on blood. Right, it's universalist, right? It's like everybody, everybody who's born here, regardless of who your parents are, regardless of anything, right? You're equally, starting out, as an American, and this is like I think that's amazing, like that we've achieved this. I mean, some of it's for really bad reasons, right? Because I mean, some of it's like an after effect of really bad stuff, the dispossession of natives, et cetera, right? Some of it.
Are you saying you're not proud to be an American, Ben?
No, I'm not proud of that part.
Say you're proud, bitch. Say you're proud.
Well,
kind of conversation happening around the 4th, but go on.
Yeah. I mean, no, I'm definitely not proud of the genocide parts, but but like some of it's an effect of that. Some of it's an effect of stuff that's neither good nor bad, but is just like kind of neutral historical happenstance that like, even American white people can trace their families back to so many different places that like it stopped there being too strong an association between Americanness and like any particular like European ancestry. And then some of it's a result of really good stuff I actually am proud of, right? That like, the world historic victories of the civil rights movement in the 50s and 60s, like sort of helping to sever any connection between Americanness and as national identity and even like whiteness, right? So yeah, I mean, I think as a result of all those things, some really bad, some really good, like, but the end result is fucking fantastic, which is that, we have a national identity that's not linked. That's, I don't want to speak in the absolute terms. Obviously, not de jure bitch is compatible with a certain amount of, de facto, right? But like, it's not, but to a historically and globally remarkable extent, we have a national identity that's not linked to ethnicity or ancestry, right? Nobody talks about being like a quarter American, right? Mm-hmm. Like a very rare way to talk, right? It'd be like really weird sounding, right? Sound like a category mistake because American is not normally thought of as the name of an ethnicity. That's fantastic, right? I mean, I think liberal democracy is really, really good, which I know sometimes people who agree with me politically don't like it, are sort of uncomfortable when I say that because it sounds like, oh, wait a second, like we should just not give a shit about that because like we want this other more radical thing. But it's like, I would say that it's really, really good as a starting point from which to fight for the better and more radical things going forward, right? I have, if you want socialism, you want something better than this, I think this is a really indispensable starting point, which is also, by the way, I've got to say, it's pretty funny in bringing it back to Batya and Brad, that he had that reference to fascism and she just kind of pretended he hadn't said it.
Well, she kind of pretended he didn't say a lot of things, right? But I mean, I did, sort of have a vocalization at that moment, which I remember when I originally watched it. The part that stuck out to me where she was like, they want to kill us. They want to kill us. They want to kill us. They want us dead. And I'm like, yeah, that's what it is. There it is. It's that core Jewish trauma, which again, understandable core Jewish trauma, like kind of like a collective trauma, a collective wound based on centuries and centuries of persecution, obviously in the most immediate rear view mirror, a genocide on their own people, like, but actually bringing it back around to the, to the, say you're proud, bitch, it's actually, I think those things are connected though, because in the sense that what I was saying earlier about like the gradient of people who are like mostly on our side, maybe we have a little bit of disagreement as it pertains to what's the right solution for Israel or whatever. And then people who are just like off this end, right? I'm relaying it back to the like, say you're proud of America, because it's so hard for me to.
The thing that I am proud of about America is the same reason I'm anti-Zionist. That I think the U.S. I think Israel should also be a state of
such great messaging, by the way. I mean, just on Zoran's part, like making it like about a state of equality, but like I was just going to say that. It's so hard for me to engage or to see, these kinds of arguments being made or these kinds of people honestly being platformed like Batya at all, because it's just like, I just don't understand that way of thinking. It's really, really, really hard as someone who, again, I'm not like the smartest person in the world, but I pride myself on being like, which is why I like you, which is why we love Sohrab, which is why we love Glenn Greenwald. Like I really appreciate people who are just like, okay, let's put our critical thinking caps on, like, let's look at like who understand the complexity of everything, who understand all of the different aspects of everything, who want to like, who are really committed to using reason and really committed to like understanding the different arguments and like breaking them down. Whereas people, I mean, in this particular subject, obviously, because she's obviously clearly, this is clearly stemming from a very like deep Jewish wound, which again, I understand where these people are coming from, but it's like, they're just so singularly focused that it's like they possibly cannot think about this in a critical way, because I think to them, to their own like ego, and by which I mean like their own like, psychological, emotional thing, it's like death. Like it would be like admitting death. And I feel like that's where they feel super vulnerable and out of control. So it's like, we have to, it's the same with the, are you proud to be American thing? I tweeted around like the 4th when I was seeing all this, are you proud to be American? Are you proud to be American? They're not proud to be American. I'm like, this is the same equivalent of like, do you believe Israel has a right to exist? Like it's the same, or like, do you condemn Hamas? It's that same kind of frame of thinking that's like, it's either this or that. It's either, you think Israel has a right to exist or you don't. And then that means, are you proud to be American or are you not proud to be American? It's like, girl, this, like you just noted, like I'm proud of a multitude of things. I mean, I rewatched John Adams over the weekend. And, it was like rereading the Declaration of Independence, literally almost to tears. Because it's a beautiful, but also, yes, these people owned slaves. They were also grappling with these very, like John Adams and his wife, were against slavery. They were, but women didn't have the right to share their voice through voting, so there were lots of people who were against certain things, but they didn't have a voice. There's a storied history in America going back to genocide, going back to settler colonialism, but there's also labor movements and suffrage movements here in New York, abolitionist movements, there's so much beauty, and then there's so much terror, and then there's so much beauty, and then there's so much terror. And it's like, it's just hard for me to see these people and these pundits who I just don't understand how they think like that. It's really hard for me to get into that way of thinking, because I just like fundamentally do not share that way of seeing the world. And it's like, how can you even reason with people who, like, I'm sorry, really think like a child? Like, I know that sounds so mean. I'm actually really not trying to be mean. Like, it really is just a very child.
But yeah, right. I mean, like the people who freaked out about the those who were on 4th of July speech because he didn't just say that everything in America was already great, right? Right. Even though, right, he was definitely doing the left patriotism thing. He was like speaking from behind George Washington's desk, surrounded by newly naturalized citizens, holding little miniature American flags, right? But because he was talking about complexities and contradictions and and all that stuff. Yeah, that was like enough for them to be like, oh, he's saying he hates America. It's like, that really is thinking like a child, right? Like he's obviously not saying that. I would say, by the way, on what you were just saying about John Adams and slavery. So I have been, as I mentioned a couple times before, this is the reason why the episode frequency slowed down so much this summer, more than anything else. I have been working on this book, adapting Matt Christman's the transcripts of his Kush vlogs from 2020 to 2023 into a book of essays. And I just wanted to share this little snippet that I thought was really interesting. This is from the Kush vlog transcripts, as lightly edited, rearranged a little bit might be. But I think it's Matt saying some really smart stuff about the American Revolution. He says this. So this is all Matt here. Kevin Phillips has a really interesting book called The Cousins War. Actually, here I'll just share this. Where he essentially says the English Civil War, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War are all one long conflict in the Anglosphere between landowners, so the residual feudal ruling class, and emerging merchant middle class, which would eventually take over from feudalism. The story of these three wars over the course of 300 years is the story, or at least the last act of the story of feudalism being fully overthrown and replaced by capitalism. I think there's a lot to that. Some left-wing people today might deny there was anything progressive about the American Revolution, but that's silly. You cannot have the possibility for socialism until you have capitalism first demolishing the feudal order. You could almost say socialism is a shadow form of capitalism. It is only conceivable in the real context of capitalist relations. The liberation from the pre-modern feudal order is a necessary condition for then capitalism gives birth to socialism's culmination. Phillips's main argument is the social basis of the two sides of those three wars are basically the same. In the English Civil War, the Roundheads, the Puritan side, were city dwellers, they were merchants, and the Cavaliers were the large landowning class basically left over from the feudal order of the Middle Ages. You could say this wasn't true absolutely. There were plenty of exceptions on both sides, but that was broadly the division. Then the Revolutionary War is essentially a battle between the old regime that still had one foot in feudalism and the most industrious, most religiously effusive of those merchants, the ones who were so discontented with that regime that they fucked off to the New World. They essentially created their own country, and then they went to war with a homeland which was still largely controlled within itself by the semi-feudal old landowning class, even as capitalism had been developing for some time. It wasn't entirely controlled by that class. The Whigs at that point were already the merchant party, the urban party within that system, and they were in power sometime soon. And also, though, they were the people who were the most likely to be sympathetic to the United States. William Pitt, the guy Pittsburgh is named after, was a Whig politician who supported the colonists. And then, of course, the Civil War is the culmination of that longer war, the part of it that was waged entirely within the United States. What the South was trying to do, what they managed to pull off until they didn't, was to recreate the old feudal order in the New World. That brought them into conflict with the rapidly industrialized being the merchant state of the North. These battles are happening as capitalism is emerging in its most effective and durable form, growing out of a sort of feudal loam. And it's easy to think of this in terms of clearly marked off stages. First we have the feudal era, and then the capitalist one. But even if that's true in broad strokes, the process of transition is not a fast or decisive one. It's a dialectical process. It's existing forms of power negotiated with emergent forms of power, first through politics, and then when that fails, through warfare. But at every point, the victory was won by the capitalists, and by the end of it, the power that was left over from feudalism had been broken. And you could say, oh, but the neo-feudal guys of the South sided with the Patriots in the Revolutionary War. How does that fit in? But zoom in and look at the details of what happened. The reason that Cornwallis marched the Brits south after they took New York is because there was so much loyalist sympathy in the South among the large landowners than there was up north. Now, guys like Washington and Jefferson were, of course, pro-revolution, but that was not true broadly among the large landowning class of the South, or at least not anything like as true as it was the northern merchant class. Those neo-feudalist plantation owners tended to be more Tory. What you think about guys like Washington and Jefferson and how they ended up on the revolutionary side, what part of the South they came from. The big Southern revolutionaries tended to be guys from Virginia. It was the Southern colony that was the closest to the northern merchant centers, the one whose economy was most tied to what was going on in those centers. And, he goes on like that. But I thought that was a really interesting way of thinking about this and like the dynamics, of what was going on in the Revolutionary War. And, it's because like you said, I mean, even like, people like John and Abigail Adams were already anti-slavery, in the 1770s, right? Obviously the Southerners weren't, but there was like, but like the parts of the country that were the most militantly revolutionary in the War of Independence, the Revolutionary War, were in like Massachusetts, places like that, where there was like the most anti-slavery, sentiment. So, I think that you can acknowledge that obviously there's this massive hypocrisy, by like the Southerners who are involved. There's this huge contradiction, in the early part of it, but like also like, I don't know, I think some people like feel edgier when they're like, no, America, always sucked, it's like there was nothing good at all, right? It's like,
for a point, right?
Right? Yeah.
That's what you're saying. Like it wasn't, just like I just made the point that DSA itself, it's like, it's not all one monolith on not all Jews, hashtag not all Jews, they don't all think the same way, have the same thoughts. And yeah, exactly. Like also Black people didn't have a right to vote. Women didn't have a right to vote. How many of those individuals who did not have the right to have their voice have any power in the matter, how many of them disagreed with how things were going on, how things were run? And then actually to the political point, and I don't feel like I'm like confidently able to talk about this as like a Revolutionary War historian, but just from what I was watching, you know, in John Adams, like as they were writing the Declaration, there was, you know, the word slave like was used, but like they had to take it out. Like there were reasons why it was like sort of jockeying back and forth, but you know,
there was a big debate about whether to talk about, you know,
which is
slavery.
ironic. Jefferson slaves.
Yeah.
Like
yeah,
what?
no. Oh my God, yeah. But also, you know, I mean, this is the huge inconsistency there. I mean, but you know, I think if you don't see if you don't see I guess this is just me agreeing with you. Like, I think that if you just sort of have this childlike, right, you know, like either you know, either like America was, you know, was the greatest thing of all time for the moment that it started, and you know, Jesus personally dictated the Constitution, you know, to James Madison and all this.
Well, there's an argument for that of a supernatural force. Then you know, I'm going to bring that into the mix. That George Washington saw like an angel, and during the snowy battle or whatever. I've watched John Adams, the documentary, and I've also watched a lot of like History Channel's Ancient Aliens, and aliens around the signing of the Declaration. Yeah. But like the point is like to say, like in the Declaration, I just want to be a patriot for a minute. And this line, when he says, but when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. So it's like, yeah, that's what people are trying to do as it pertains to our funding to Israel right now. Like it's the same tyrannical kind of force. It's just wearing different clothes. And that's what's so frustrating is that these, I'm sorry, but these like childlike minds, like they can't like make the connection. It's like, how do you not make the connection between Nazism and Zionism? Like it's just wearing different clothes. Like it's the same kind of tyrannical force.
Certainly variations of, of ethno-nationalism and authoritarianism and militarism and all that. Yeah, no question. I mean, I think, it was also interesting. One of the things that I thought was really funny in the Batya Lander interview was that she played this clip of Zoran, where he talks about AIPAC. She started it too late to get the, it's like the fact that he's like using the phrase monsters seems a little weird because she started the clip after so he was quoting the Antonio Gramsci, right? Who has the famous line about the old world is, dying and the new world is not yet ready to be born. This is the time of monsters. And, he quotes that and starts, listing off the monsters, right? And it's funny because like in the actual clip, I mean, this wasn't the clip that she played. In the clip she played, he lists off he gives three examples of like big money influence in politics. And AIPAC was the third one, right?
Was it the Zoran clip?
Yeah, the Zoran clip, like he gives a couple of examples, right? I mean, like he says the dark buddy said blah blah blah, whatever. Like he goes through different forms of money influence in politics. And AIPAC is his, I think, third example. I mean, it's certainly the one he talks about at the end of the clip, and then she's like, "Oh, why single out AIPAC?" It's like, well, he's not. Right? I mean, he's literally not in your own clip. And then the way she says it is, she says, but AIPAC is just Americans. We're concerned about blah blah blah. Why should they have any less right to, And it's like, well, wait a second, hold on, Batya. You're a populist, right? You're always saying that you're a populist. You're a populist. You care about the working class. All this stuff you always say. you think rich people have a right to like write massive campaign donations and influence politics? Really?
Yeah.
Like,
right.
and if the point is,
Jewish,
I mean,
I guess.
yeah, if they're Jewish and they're the right kind of Jewish, they're pro-Israel, then yeah, I guess then they do, right? But like it's but then it's also like, okay, so it's like, yeah, are you saying like, do you think they have a right to do this?
Right.
Or if not, are you just saying, oh, it's like selective? Because again, it's clearly not selective. It wasn't selective in the Zoran clip, and it's not selective in Lander's response, where it's like, he was like, yeah, no, I want to get all the money out, right? But like, it's also, I guess, maybe the last thing I wanted to say before I forgot that you kind of said this earlier, but I just wanted to kind of circle and underline it because it's so funny to me, is that she, in her intro to the episode, she says, oh, these candidates, and that would include Lander, right, weren't campaigning on healthcare, right? They were campaigning on, Palestine and all this other stuff. Okay. So then you notice in the interview with Lander, she didn't say that to him. And I think the reason she didn't say it to him is because she knew that if she did, he'd be like, what are you talking? I mean, he'd say it in a very nice Mr. Rogers way, but I mean, he would say like, what are you talking about, Batya? Look at my campaign website. It's full of stuff about healthcare and blah, 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 right? Like, it's like clearly all of these people were. I mean, even Chevalier, right, was was the one, with the, the sort of the biggest history of, saying stupid shit on Twitter 6 years ago or whatever. But it's like her, even when she talked about Palestine in the campaign, it was always relating it to domestic economics.
Babies, not
right?
bombs.
Exactly.
Let's
right.
Babies, not bombs. Let's have our money here. Again, is great messaging on the part of these politicians, of these leftist politicians. Abdul al-Sayed, I think, has one of the best, which is what he's like, money out of politics, money in your pocket, Medicare for all, which I'm like,
yeah,
because it's making those connections.
I'm so happy. I have I'm so sad. I live in LA on purpose.
Yeah.
But I grew up in Michigan. I'm so sad I don't get to vote there right now. I have I'm so excited by this. There have real good chance that we get the first former GTA guest in the Senate now.
He came on the show once.
You did, yeah.
I have that book where, the Medicare for All book, which
it was to talk about the Medicare for All book. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't realize that it was him, you know what I mean? Like until the Senate campaign, I was like, oh, it's him. And I remember watching him on like certain podcasts talk about it. Yeah. Well, that's another point that I want to try and do, like a little, like for my Substack, I want to like maybe do like a journalistic, it's like, okay, this is anecdotal, we get it, but like asking people about their stand, like kind of their political journey, and then like where they are on issues right now. And like, hopefully I can get people across. I mean, I'm mainly talking about like family members and like friends, you know what I mean? Because there's family members and friends who I know are like Republican, or who are, maybe a little like liberal centrist, or who are even consider themselves left, who have shifted. But I'm really interested in like how Republicans, like my family is Republican, but like I was telling this to Sorab the other day. I'm like, I don't understand who this Fox News, this hyper Israel, obsession is for, because like I don't even think my people, like my family, are like, first of all, I don't think that they really know what's going on, but I don't see them being like, yeah, we should be giving all this money to Israel. Like I feel like they're probably like, this is weird. Like why should I see Israel in my dreams, Haley Stevens? Like, why? I don't understand what's going on. You know what I mean? So I mean, and maybe they do. Maybe they are like, no, we should be funding them, but like I don't. My family is like super religious, and like I don't. I don't think it's a large chunk of this country. Where in another interview or that other debate that Batya had with that other person, she was like, support for Israel is like the predominant, it's like popular, and basically saying that like most of the country agrees. And I'm like, girl, what country are you living in?
Yeah. Well, I mean, literally not. I mean, because there was a poll that came out pretty recently where for the first time in American history, more Americans say that they sympathize with Palestinians than with Israelis primarily, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, just like data says no, right? I mean, this is like they're there used to be a show on ESPN called Numbers Never Lie, which were like where the co-hosts would argue about some sports topic of the week, and then at the end they'd like trot out some stat that was supposed to settle it, and it always drove me crazy because it's like, well, wait a second, why is that the stat that settles it, right? Like there are like others you could point to, but like this really does seem like a good number. Like, hey, data says no, this is not what the majority of Americans think right now, right? That this is like, I think that you have, or certainly way, I mean, yeah, like I said, for the first time, you do have more people saying that they primarily sympathize with Palestinians, certainly on cutting off aid, right? Like, I mean, that's hugely, I mean, look, most Americans aren't crazy about foreign aid of any kind, right? I mean, I think that they had like certainly to, foreign aid that's linked to these like images that people have seen for 2 years of mutilated babies and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, that's gonna be pretty unpopular, right? Like, and I think, yeah, it's like, yeah, I think that they're like evangelicals are still mostly very pro-Israel, although even they're like not as unified about that as they used to be, like at all, right? Like I mean, like some of them like breaking off in like creepy anti-Semitic, Christ is king, kinds of directions, but like, ones who, which also, by the way, is one of the dangers of spending like decades like training these people to think that Jews were special magical people, that like when they start to think that they might be doing bad things, it's like, okay, now they're like special magical bad people. They're like demons, right? But like, but whatever. Like, yeah, even the evangelicals, it's like it's got more complicated now. Certainly, American Jews got way more complicated, right? Zoran's polling better than Bibi is, So like, it's not, and yeah, I think like what you could say is that like older people are probably residually more pro-Israel still, but even that's like not what they used to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, yeah. So I don't know.
It just feels like I know it a lot still is very bad, but I really do feel, I mean, it could be too Pollyanna, I get it. But like, I really do feel like it's just shifted so much, and that what we're seeing is like a continuous lashing out, because the power is sort of getting out of their grip, and like, the narrative now, it's like they can't control the narrative. That's why there's this, are you proud of America? It's like I feel the fear of like, we don't control the narrative as much anymore. People are starting to ask questions. People are starting to, put their critical thinking caps on, hopefully. And like, we're losing the narrative. We're losing the grip on our power. So again, I don't want to be too optimistic, but like, it does kind of feel like that is the direction that things are going. And these people are like, they're terrified of losing that, Yeah. So I would look at that as a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No question whatsoever. That is a very, very good thing. And yeah, it's just, I don't know. It also just to circle it back to one last point about the original video, like nobody in media is a worse defender for like saying that like some huge group of like saying that like some great collective of people all think whatever she thinks.
Yeah.
Batya, right. That's it's like yeah. Americans think this or that, right? Like, yeah, Americans want to support Israel. That's like Jews think that Zoran is scary. The working class thinks that Trump is great, right? It's like she just like whatever thoughts are in her own head, she will just attribute to like whatever like big collective she wants to identify with. Even when like it's bad enough to do that, when it's like 55% of the people in the group agree with you and 45% disagree, it's like already pretty fucking stupid, right? I mean, it's like, but in this case, a lot of the times it's the other way around, right? I mean, it's like yeah, just objectively, you look at polls. Trump is super unpopular, Israel is super unpopular. Batya, I'm sure you have brilliant things to say about the form of the English novel between 1719 and 1741, but this stuff I'm much less impressed by.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I was going to say, like, even if I was on the other end of that and said, like, most Americans agree that, like, we should start funding Israel, I still acknowledge the complexities within that, as we were just talking about earlier. I'm like, and for probably, even if they all agree, even if I said many Americans, agree that we should stop funding Israel and stop sending military aid and stop the genocide, I would also make the point that, like, and there's a lot of people who, for different reasons, you know what I mean? There's those of us on the left, and yeah, I'm sure there, and we know that there are people who, yeah, for mainly anti-Semitic reasons, or for these weird, like, Christmas adventurer, white nationalist reasons, or for the case of Tucker Carlson, which I would make the vibes argument has a lot to do with, like, American exceptionalism and just, and obviously I think there's shades of anti-Semitism there too. And I think that there's shades of, like, not wanting the neocons to, like, tell me what to do, like, fuck them. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not listening to Marco Rubio. But then there are those of us who, like, just genuinely continue to bring this back to human rights and wanting to maintain, every state and not have an ethno state, and to more importantly not be aiding and abetting an ethno state, and even more importantly also keeping our own not sending their tax dollars to aid and abet an ethno state and a genocide. So
no, yeah, that last point is the most important one, because, like, it's also I also do want to distinguish, because, like, earlier we were talking about, like, what I think, like, justice would be, right, in Israel-Palestine, but also, that would have to come from within that society, right? I mean, there's no way to, like, yeah, I don't like Saudi theocracy, but, like, there's no way from, like, the other side of the world to, like, somehow turn Saudi Arabia into a secular democracy, and, same principle for Israel, right? So I think that the really important question is, like, for Americans, right? I mean, because we can't, like, transforming that society into something better and more along the lines of the ideals we were talking about is, like, something that people over there would have to do, right? Like, so, but the important thing for America is, like, okay, but as long as it is going to be an ethno state, are we gonna like prop it up and fund it, right?
Enabling.
Yeah, exactly. Right?
You're enabling.
And then, like, especially while that ethno state commits genocide against its non-citizen internal population in Gaza, right? Then like, especially, are we gonna enable that, right? I mean, that's, like, the really important question, right? So that's why, like, yeah, I mean, if I, I certainly would have, enthusiastically supported Brad Lander, because, like, even though I would, like, go further than him and, like, what I think justice in the Middle East would look like. I mean, like, I think he's certainly going to be a very reliable vote for, like, not sending more bombs to Israel to drop on refugee camps.
And being a voice in Congress that actually, again, for maybe a lot of leftists, it doesn't go as far. Or they don't agree that there's there should be such thing as a liberal Zionist. I get it. But, like, even just having more voices, and I know maybe, again, there's also some people on the left who are like, that doesn't matter. I do think it matters. I think it matters that you have people who are in these positions of power who are actively speaking out and who are acting, putting voice to it and in a very direct way, like Marjorie Taylor Greene on The View. Even though she's not in a position of political power anymore, she is actively out there and making the case for that, which I would like to see more of from AOC, someone like AOC. But, it's nice to have these voices in Congress who are able to, bring voice to that and just more and more and more altogether. Like if you get Abdul in, if you get in, like, I guess we have no idea what's going to happen in Maine now, but,
we're, as we head into the final minutes of this, let's not do Plattner discourse.
Yes.
But, I think left media has done enough of that. But yeah, that's. But yeah, no. I mean, look, yeah, I have no idea what's going to happen in Maine now that he's out. But I have. But yeah, I think Michigan. I mean, Michigan right now looks to me like the most promising one as far as the Senate goes. But I mean, like for the House, I mean, this is already fucking amazing. I mean, there's going to be
Milat now, and then Claire and Daria Lisa. Hopefully that guy from
Chris Rand, right?
Oliver Larkin.
Yeah. Which I think Larkin's supposed to come on the show at some point.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely the two new DSA people from New York, plus the third extremely DSA adjacent person we were just watching in New York, and then definitely the Denver and Philadelphia, right? So
Chris Rabb, yeah,
exactly, yeah,
and then hopefully Cori Bush is going to get back in.
That would be amazing, yeah. So yeah, it's like I think this is. Yeah, I mean, it's. I mean, this is pretty incredible. I mean, like because we're gonna go from having two DSA members in Congress right now to like because all the people we just listed off were in safe blue districts, so. Probably at least 6, maybe more, right? At the beginning of next year, like this is, this is really good, and it's also really good for me because every time somebody like Batya freaks out about it, it's good content, it's good content for us.
Right. I do. I don't know. Sometimes I do just like feel bad with where these people are at. Cause I'm just I just don't understand how you can see it that way. But that's the point of American democracy. It's like, you have to tussle with different ideas. Again, sorry, but I would make the argument that these aren't even like ideas. To me, it just is like a reactionary, sorry, but like, again, childlike, deep fear, that these people have. So it's not like, I always bristle at that. Like, we have different ideas. I'm like, they're not really ideas that these people are espousing. It's just a reaction to criticism. Really, it's a reaction to other people pointing out their blind spots and exposing the blind spots, and then allowing for the discourse to move in that direction. And those people being like, no, pull it back in my direction. I'm losing power. I'm losing, even if they're not consciously aware of this. It's like that's what's happening. It's like it's happening on the level of like the billionaires and Bill Ackman being upset about the people starting to wake up and be like, wait, maybe I'm making a connection between the affordability crisis and how our economic systems and structures are set up. And then people saying, wait, maybe I'm now starting to make the connection between these horrors that are happening overseas and how our government is enabling it. And I think I'm interested to see how it starts to play out, because again, there's someone like me who wasn't a member of DSA in 2015, who honestly, I hate to admit this, but like, who really didn't know anything about this particular issue until like things started to pop up, until like, I was sort of like a little bit getting to know it in like 2021 with like, wasn't there something that happened in 2020? Like BDS was like, started to exchange some, I'm so sorry, you guys. I know I'm not like a scholar, so I feel shitty. But actually, no, this is good because I'm kind of like your average person. I'm your average American who honestly didn't really know about, Israel, Palestine, didn't know about had no idea about the conflict, had no idea about our involvement in it. And like, unfortunately, you don't know things until you know them. You don't know things until you know them. And then and then more information that you can get then you start to hopefully make different decisions, and you start to have different ideas on the matter, and you start to have different opinions on the matter. And for me, you know, again, I'm always pride myself on being as a reasoned thinker as I can. And it's like, let me collect all of the evidence. Let me see the different opposing ideas and sides, and then make sort of my decisions for myself before I just like glob on to, which again, I think is a legitimate critique to be like, oh, all these like leftists just because it's like cool or whatever. I mean, fine, sure. I'm sure there are some people who like don't think about this stuff in any capacity and are just like, yeah, this is what my side says now, you know, but like, I think any person is seeing the evidence and making, you know, their
I also think,
evidence.
I also think a lot of people, you know, I mean, yeah, look, people are going to make decisions for all sorts of reasons. If you know, like if we do end up living in a world where it's considered cool to you know, to fight for economic equality and an end to genocide, then that seems like good news to me. But like, I also think that in a lot of cases, you know, people are more open to these ideas now because they're having more trouble making rent than they used to, and because they have seen 2.5 years of continuous horror in the Middle East, and they have a normal human reaction to it. That's a good thing. But speaking of the discourse, Cynthia, when are you starting a podcast? When's this happening?
Well, but I know I have to like be intent. Well, you know, that's part of what I'm trying to work on this weekend is, you know, hopefully to be intentional about really starting something, because as I can see, it's not that complicated. I just like, but you know, Ben, you also have some great intro music. Did Charles Mingus do that, or did you hire someone to intro music? Background.
I think the person who did this, who did the intro music, he had, I mean, it's obviously there are like different people on different instruments, but it was like the session he was on, and he was like, hey, nobody has the rights to this. If you want it, you know, if you want it to, I think it was like a basically like, you know, cover my lunch, and you know, and I'll just give this to you right for your new show, right? You know, so there's that kind of fell into my lap, but you know, you could definitely find somebody who I'm sure would be happy to. In fact, I could probably put you in touch with somebody who I'll bet would make some little intro thing for you. But anyway, I hope you do. I will happily come on it if it comes into existence. But that is it for today. I'm going to be back on Tuesday, same time, 1 p.m. East Coast, 10 a.m. West Coast, to talk to David Griscom about his new book, The Myth of Red Texas. So really looking forward.
Oh, I love him. Shout out.
Yeah, really looking forward to that. Left is best.